Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday. Super excited that you can join us today. My name is Jen Harris. I am the founder and executive director with Connected to Lead. And I'm ecstatic because today we get to talk about something that I am excited about. It gives me great joy to bring information regarding youth, substance abuse, and COVID-19. So to get us started, I'm going to pull up our slides so that way you all can see them. We'll have opportunities for you to type in the chat. We want to hear from you. We want you to, get some information in so we know, that you're connected, that you are getting the information because it's extremely important. And so I first want to address COVID-19 and say, definitely the last 2 years, going on 3 years, has been extremely difficult for a lot of people. And substance abuse has definitely played a role in folks using substances, whether they're legal or illegal, to cope. And this is no different as it relates to our youth, our young people within the communities that we serve and live in. And so we're going to jump right in. I want to tell you a little bit about Connected to Lead. So our mission is to create space for people of all ages to make meaningful connections while strengthening the leader within them. And so we do provide a variety of services. We primarily focus on leadership development, but we also offer counseling, case management, and mentorship. And at least half of our team has a background in substance abuse prevention and treatment. And so we get to do workshops like this. We get to speak at different conferences. We also get to do a lot of programming in schools and so forth. And so my contact info will be at the end. If you're interested in reaching out and connecting, I'd love to hear from you. So let's first start with the state of youth substance abuse. This is extremely important as it relates to, COVID-19 started in 2020. March of 2020 is when it really hit the fan and things were starting to shut down. Folks were starting to work from home. Students were being sent home from school to do schoolwork from home. Schools were trying to figure it out, right? There was a lot going on at the beginning of the pandemic. And so youth substance abuse was definitely something we started hearing about, and also mental health as well. And so we want to make sure we can provide some information for you all as it relates to that, so you can understand where the place we're starting from. So nationally, as reported in December of 2020, there have been an increase in alcohol use, cigarette use amongst 12th graders, vaping nicotine, vaping marijuana, over-the-counter medications and cough syrup, inhalants. And so these are different household things that you could purchase, maybe sniffing glue, spray paint, cleaning supplies, things like that. We saw an increase with middle school to 10th grade. And then also hallucinogens and LSD. So this is as it relates to on the national scale. So not just California, not just the South Bay, including Carson, Gardena, Torrance, Hawthorne, those areas, but this is on a national level, so throughout the United States. And then additionally, there was a decrease as it related to heroin, jewel use or jeweling, or vaping using jewel devices, and then also a slight decrease in marijuana. And so this is these topics or these substance abuse issues were seen with middle and high school students. And so again, this was on the national level. And this is what we were hearing about in December of 2020. As things progressed throughout COVID, we started to hear, a continued increase with a lot of these substances, especially underage drinking. A part of that was access in the home, being at home, having the alcohol there, teens reporting that they were vaping, also using prescription drugs from medicines that were left in medicine cabinets and things like that as a means to be able to cope with the stressors and the things that they were experiencing with substance abuse and the pandemic. And then as it relates to the South Bay, within Southern California, some of the drug trends that we were seeing then, and we have been seeing still, are alcohol as it relates to underage drinking, also vaping, both nicotine and marijuana, using marijuana, whether it's in an edible form as something you can eat, or marijuana smoke through a joint or something like that. And then also prescription drugs and opioids. And as I talk about opioids, I'm also including fentanyl in that area. We've definitely been seeing a rise of fentanyl use. A part of it, though, has been folks purchasing drugs off the street. And with the drugs that they've been getting, what they've been purchasing has been laced with fentanyl. And so we've definitely seen that within the South Bay. We've seen it in Los Angeles County and also nationally, and definitely something that is on the rise. So let's talk about substance abuse and COVID-19 and just really what we've seen over the last 2 years. So as it relates to substance use and abuse regarding COVID-19, we've seen an increase in substance use and abuse. It has been extremely challenging for folks who've been in recovery, especially when the pandemic first started, because there was this huge shutdown and folks were told you cannot leave your house. And so for someone who's in a treatment program, that was especially difficult because they may have been used to going to the site, going to individual counseling with their counselor, receiving some form of group counseling and so forth, right? AA groups and different things like that. Additionally, we saw an increase of opioid overdose deaths, some related to fentanyl, a lot that weren't related to fentanyl, folks who had abused or used some form of opioid, consumed too much and overdosed and died. We also, something really interesting, saw that marijuana dispensaries were considered essential. So when a lot of other businesses and organizations were being shut down because they were considered non-essential, marijuana dispensaries were considered essential. And so they were allowed to stay open, which provided access as well. And then something that was really interesting is that for organizations who were funded by the county to provide treatment services for substance abuse, they weren't really, a lot of them weren't really doing telehealth prior to that. And there are definitely some things within the system within LA County and reasons why that they weren't doing it. However, we started to see that telehealth became available. A part of this was due to a lot of the safety concerns around COVID-19, the rate of transmission, being in a space with a lot of people. We didn't have a lot of the protocols that were established as COVID continued to be with us as it is now. And then also, one of the things that we realized is that for folks who were in treatment when COVID first started, it was more effective for someone who had received a certain level of care prior to COVID-19, and they were already going to groups, they were participating in recovery services versus someone who had just started right before the pandemic and things had to shift for them really quickly, or even for folks who may have found it really challenging or had a hard time in the virtual space connecting to some form of group or receiving treatment. We saw that it was definitely difficult, but thankful that telehealth became available. So let's talk about youth substance use and abuse, and COVID-19. Some of the things that we've been seeing, we saw then, we're seeing now, an increase in opioid use and abuse, specifically amongst teens. And again, access being in the homes, in the cabinets, sharing with friends, students having to shift so many different things in their lives. I remember growing up and I didn't have to experience COVID-19 when I was in high school, right? Many of us did not have to experience that. And so we didn't have to do school virtually. We were in person. We were able to connect with our friends and so forth. And so there were quite a few young people who chose to cope using substance abuse. And so one of the ways was through opioid use and abuse. Also, vaping was still on the rise. I don't know if you recall, but prior to COVID-19, there was something called EVALI. And so we were hearing about these different cases throughout the United States where folks who were vaping were experiencing what's called popcorn lungs, where they had these holes in their lungs. They were having trouble breathing. There were folks having to be ventilated, and just experiencing all these difficulties. And then COVID hit and that shifted the discussion, right? But vaping, even though we saw vaping, an increase in vaping then, we're still continuing to see it. And a part of it goes back to the access. And also young people using it as a means to cope or being influenced by peer pressure. And we've still been hearing a lot of the same things. And then also we've been hearing reports of new users. So young people who've reported that I've never tried a drug before, but I started during COVID. Young people experienced social isolation. They were missing connection. Adults were too, right? But very different in the sense that, as a young person, not being able to see your friends, which most of the time happens at school. But even if you had friends who lived on your same block, not being able to see them and connect with them in the same ways, having to stay in the house. We were hearing about, unfortunately, young folks or even spouses being in a home where domestic violence was, and them being able to go to work or go to school as an outlet, and to take them out of that domestic violence situation, going back into that situation and having to be there with an abuser for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so, there was just a lot going on, and some of which still is going on because we're seeing folks who are experiencing the effects of it. And then also, there have been a lot of folks who talked about Zoom and online fatigue. So we definitely want to say thank you for showing up today. Thank you for being present, because, definitely I would love for this to be in person, but I also recognize cases are going back up. There's a new variant, and so it's important to be safe. But that doesn't mean that folks aren't feeling fatigued from being online, and you may hear Zoom fatigue because that is the platform that has been easy to use and folks were able to navigate it easily and schools were using it and so forth. And then also something else that has been really interesting is the number of young people who've reported experiencing mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. Versus prior to the pandemic, how many young people actually spoke about that and reported. And so it's important that we look at that, because someone's mental health issues or experiencing anxiety or depression can lead them to try other things to cope. And sometimes those things may have a positive impact on them, like reading a book, being able to walk, or do some gardening or some other things. And sometimes it can have a negative impact on them, like cutting themselves to harm themselves, or practicing some other form of self-harm, or using substances, maybe even if they know that, they shouldn't use it, or It may have some negative impact, or the medication or whatever it was wasn't prescribed to them. And then I want to talk a little bit about Jeannie. She's one of our partners. And, we had an opportunity to talk at the end of 2020, interestingly enough. So she lives in Monrovia. And during a very brief period of time, the city had 6 youth suicides within a few months. 6 youth suicides. Every parent reported that they did not know anything was wrong with their children. And this is something that tends to happen, is parents saying, well, I thought they were okay, or they never told me something was wrong, or whatever the case may be. And so it's important as parents, as loved ones, even as friends, right, that we are checking in on the folks that are around us, that we are connecting with them and finding opportunities to connect so we can best support them and to make sure they're good. We also need to make sure we're checking in on ourselves, right? It's important that you all are taking care of yourselves, because how can you help someone else if you aren't good, right? If you don't have all the tools that you need in your toolbox to be well, how can you best serve and best support other people? And so it's important that we understand and really acknowledge COVID-19 has been difficult. It has been extremely difficult. However, we are resilient. Again, we are resilient. You are resilient, right? Even with all of the stressors, folks who've lost jobs, folks who've lost homes, apartments, folks who've lost loved ones because of COVID-19, because of an overdose, because of some medical ailment, whatever it is, right? We have been resilient through it all. And I want to encourage you to not give up, because it's extremely important that we stay connected and we understand that we don't need to use substances to cope. There are so many healthy ways and things that we can do in order to take care of ourselves. And so I wanted to make sure we focused on youth, because I firmly believe that youth are our now. I hear it a lot that youth are our future, but they are our now, right? We need to make sure they are good now, because it can have lasting impact, long-term impacts on our young people if we aren't mindful of that, if we aren't careful and looking out for them. And so I want to talk about addiction, because I think it's extremely important that we all have an understanding of what addiction is, and then also look at youth brain development and how addiction may impact a young person's brain, or even substance abuse and how that may impact a young person's brain. So while the video is playing, I'm going to have my camera off so you can focus on the video, and then I will come right back to it. And so as we continue, we're going to talk about the patterns of drug use. And so we have this pyramid listed here. And with this pyramid, I want to talk about, as it relates to drug use, how folks usually start at the bottom in the experimental phase, and then they may move up and ultimately get to compulsive behavior. So for the experimental phase, usually it's someone who's like, I'm just trying to get this one time, or someone encouraged me to do it. They asked me to do it. They gave it to me. I'm just going to try it. Not someone who is a regular user. So this is someone who's just experimenting with it. My parents pissed me off, so I'm going to go drink some alcohol, whatever it is, right? It is in an experimental phase. Then we move up to recreational and social use. So it's more like, relax, I'm just having fun. So someone at this stage, they're looking at their use as, I just do it socially. I just do it every once in a while. I don't have a problem. Then we move into situational, where folks who are at this phase are like, I had a stressful day, or my mom pissed me off, or work was really hard today, right? It's about a situation, something that came up that, you know, motivated that person to use a particular substance. Then we have intensive. This is where someone is like, I need it to function. And I will say too, there may be folks who aren't saying, I need this drug, I need alcohol to function, I need weed to get out of the bed. They may not be saying that, but their behaviors, their actions, their frequency of use may say it. And then lastly, we have compulsive. So this is someone who's like, I know it's bad for me, but I can't stop. They need to have it. They want to have it. And so as we look at addiction, we'll be able to see how someone can get to this compulsive behavior. And so let's jump in. This video is called Nuggets, and we'll have an opportunity to talk through the video once it stops playing. All right. So I want you to think about what are some of the things that you saw. If there's a chat box available, please type in the chat. What are some of the things that you saw in the video? So, I mean, one of the things we saw is the bird, right? And as the bird was walking, the bird saw a nugget. The bird looked at the nugget and kept walking. Then the bird came across another nugget. When the bird saw the second nugget, it was curious. It messed with it, played around with it, and then decided to try the nugget. The bird then felt this euphoric feeling, floated in the air, turned yellow, and came down off of that high, came down off of that euphoric feeling, and went along its way. It came across another nugget, took that nugget in, felt this euphoric feeling, came down off of that high. And then what did the bird start to do? It started running. So it had to get to the next nugget a lot quicker. Additionally, when the bird came across the second nugget that it decided to try, the high didn't last as long. That euphoric feeling, the bird wasn't in the air as long. And as the bird continued on its path and continued to take these nuggets, unfortunately, the high wasn't the same as the first time. The amount of time it stayed in the air, that euphoric feeling wasn't there. We start to notice that the bird's body starts to deform and discolor. We notice that the screen becomes darker. And so essentially, this can be what the cycle of addiction is like. Someone may decide that they're at that experimental phase that we saw on the pyramid. And with that experimental phase, maybe it's curiosity. We hear that so much with a lot of young people. I was just curious. I just wanted to try it. Nobody told me I had to do it. I just chose to. Okay, I'm glad that we were able to acknowledge that. But then what usually happens is after that first time with experimenting, maybe it was just this one time, but then it turned into once a month or a couple times a month. Then it turns into, oh, I'm using it every week. Then it turns into, I'm using it every day. And then it turns into, I can't go without it. We see it with vaping, young people who are at school and they're so agitated and anxious that they may try to vape in class. Young people who are using some other type of substance, really, unfortunately, being so caught up in that substance that they don't know how to move forward. So, what is addiction? Addiction is defined as a chronic, relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. It is considered a brain disease because drugs change the brain. They change its structure and how it works. These brain changes can be long lasting and can lead to the harmful behavior seen in people who abuse drugs. So, to really break this down, the easiest way I could say it is this is someone who their brain has been rewired because it is a brain disease. Their brain has been rewired. And because of that rewiring of their brain, they have become dependent on whatever the substance is. They want to have it, they need to have it, so they tend to seek it more and more. And so, working with folks in treatment, one of the things that I always tell people is I have never had anyone in recovery or even someone who is currently using substances tell me that they started out wanting to be an addict. That the reason why they picked up whatever substance they use or abuse was because they wanted to become addicted. I've never heard that. And so people don't set out to become addicted. it happens along the way because of this rewiring in their brain, because they feel this euphoric feeling. And so they want to get back to that first high, or because they're really stressed out and they're using it to cope. And so it's important that we understand addiction is real. And so let's talk about youth brain development for a few minutes. As it relates to young people and their brain development, our brains as people are not fully developed until we're 25. So two portions of the brain that I want to focus on are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex, this is the part of our brain that is focused on decision making. It is not fully developed until we are 25. The amygdala, on the hand, this is the part of the brain that's focused on our emotions. And this part of the brain is fully developed between the ages of 9 to 11. Think about that. The part of our brain that's fully developed at 25 is the decision-making part of our brain. The part of our brain that's fully developed between the ages of 9 to 11 is our amygdala, which focuses on our emotions. So think about the young people in your life, or if you're a young person yourself, think about that. As you make decisions, or as those young people are making decisions, are they making logical decisions? Are they using reasoning? Or are a lot of the decisions based on emotions, right? And so at teenage years, one of the things we tend to see is that decisions that are made are based on emotions, and they're leading with the amygdala part of their brain, not the prefrontal cortex. And so substance abuse can have different impacts on a developing brain. As it relates to drugs, it can affect the reward system. It can make a young person or even an adult more vulnerable to addiction. It can impact our friend groups, right? Allowing way for negative peer pressure and for us to succumbing to that peer pressure. It can also impact different situations with us. Maybe we experience increased stress. Have you ever felt stress and you felt it all in your shoulder blades? You felt it in your shoulders, your neck, maybe experiencing migraines or different things. Substance abuse can impact us in a lot of different ways. And as it relates to the brain, let's talk about nicotine and marijuana. So nicotine can definitely impact a teenage brain. Remember, our brains are not fully developed until we're 25. And remember, someone who is addicted has had rewiring of their brain happen because of the substance's impact on their brain. And so nicotine can really impact the brain's reward system. It can lead a young person to start with one drug and then decide to try other drugs and become susceptible to addiction. Nicotine has been compared to heroin and cocaine. However, as it relates to the addiction aspect, and it's pleasurable feelings that a young person may experience, methamphetamine is up there as well. Nicotine also impacts our brain circuits that control our attention and learning. Young people may develop mood disorders. They may have issues with impulse control. And then long term, it may lead them to make decisions that they wouldn't normally make, and really increase their risk of addiction. As it relates to marijuana or weed or cannabis, whatever you want to call it, as it relates to marijuana in the brain, it can definitely impact a young person's brain, even an adult's brain, with having loss of focus. It can impact their memory. Maybe they feel greater physical sensation, but it can definitely damage the brain that's connected to our learning and our memory. And THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. So if you look at this picture of the brain, these yellow spots on here, these particular parts of the brain are focused on the impacts of marijuana on THC on the brain, that ingredient in marijuana that makes people high. So it can impact your judgment, your movement, your sensations, your rewards, your memory, and your coordination. And so we need to make sure we understand that. And then also, as it relates to the impact of substance abuse, it can impact the relationships we have with our families, our friends, maybe because the person who is using drugs is stealing, maybe they cause some parental grief, maybe there are financial hardships because the family has to pay for treatment or a funeral or something else. It can also impact your values, and our values are what inform our thoughts, words, and actions. They are extremely important because they help us grow and develop. And so I love this on the side here. It says, know the value of knowing your value. Know yourself, know your worth. And then lastly, it can also impact our mental and physical health. There is definitely a link between substance use and mental and physical health. Oftentimes, substance use is referred to as self-medication. And so there may be folks who try to self-medicate to take away any pain, to be able to cope, or whatever the case may be. So it's important that we're taking care of ourselves and not using drugs or any type of substance to support us, but really reaching out to someone. So how do you know if you or someone you know has a problem? There are 12 different steps here. I'm not going to take the time to read all of them. We can make sure the slides are made available for anyone who's interested, but let's do a couple. So number 1 says, do you think about or crave drugs or alcohol often? Number 10, have you ever been arrested or hospitalized because of your drug use? Number 5 says, have you ever used a drug without knowing what it was or how it could impact you? So if you've experienced any of those or any of the 12 listed here, then you definitely want to be mindful of that and understand that you may have a problem with substance abuse and you should get help. There are, of course, different ways that you can quit for good. So speaking to a counselor or someone you trust, being able to educate yourself about the health risks, surrounding yourself around people in your life that are not using drugs, or maybe they're also trying to quit. You can even let your friends and family know, hey, I'm trying to quit. I need your support. You can replace your drug use with any healthy and creative activity that makes you feel good. And then also, please be mindful that you may experience cravings. So you want to have something in place so you know how to manage those cravings. So what can you all do? There's a lot that you can do. You can seek help for yourself if you need it. You want to make sure you continue to educate yourself. We only had a short amount of time today, but there's a lot of information out there. And so you want to continue to educate yourself in case someone you meet is in need, or you can provide a resource, or maybe someone is struggling and you want to support them, or you yourself need the information. If you're a school administrator, or you are an employer that supervises folks, you want to make sure you check in with your staff, your teachers, folks who are under your care. If you're a teacher, you want to check in with your students. If you're a parent, please check in with your children. And if you're a young person, you want to talk to a trusted adult. That can be a parent, a counselor, a teacher, a coach, or someone else. Also, you want to provide opportunities for in-person and or virtual connection. With COVID happening and cases going back up, you want to make sure you're safe if you choose to do something in person. Also, these in-person or virtual connections can be with friends or family, with other students on campus, or within the community. You can also decide to have a movie night. You can use Zoom, one person can stream it, and then everybody can watch it and have a conversation afterwards. You can also offer counseling or support for young people. You want to make sure if you are a teacher or someone in that young person's life that is not their parent, that you let them know about any services available. Also, refer young people to substance abuse or mental health treatment programs. There's support out there. We want to make sure they get it. You can find adult mentors for these young people. You can create a peer-to-peer mentor group or program. I think that would be really awesome. You can even organize service projects. Doing good really helps folks cope in a great way. It helps them make connections and so forth. And then you can also have family competitions. Some fun things you can do are like having game nights or game days, maybe who can come up with the most healthy alternatives, who can do the most squats, or even who makes the tastiest healthy dish for lunch or dinner. Some ways for you to stay away from drugs and alcohol, maybe exercising, you can listen to music, maybe playing a sport that you really enjoy. Painting can be very good for you. Maybe talking with folks, connecting with them. We talked about service projects. You can even look at goals that you have for upcoming goals, goals in the future. You can plan for your future, and even singing or doing a hobby or something you love can be extremely helpful. We do have some resources listed here. So Connected to Lead, you can go to our website at connectedtolead.org. Behavioral health services, they provide a lot of treatment options. And so Monica Sharber is the prevention director at the Gardena location, and she can make sure any of you, adults or youth or folks you know, get treatment that they need. Erica Winston is the prevention coordinator. And then if you're looking for some tools that you can use at home, in the classroom, church, or anywhere else, flippity.net, wordwall.net, resnickcreative.com, and mentimeter.com are all great ways to have some fun, to provide information, and to really connect with folks. And so lastly, some local treatment programs. As I mentioned, BHS, they have youth treatment. And so you can get individual counseling, life skills training, anger management, case management, and so forth. Additionally, they have various treatment programs throughout the South Bay. These are not all of the programs. We did list a couple of LA programs as well, but locations in Gardena and Torrance, Wilmington, and Hawthorne all provide different services. So I'd love to stay connected with you. Feel free to reach out to me. My cell phone is listed here. My email address is jharris@connectedtolead.org, and feel free to follow us on social media at Connected to Lead. So we are developing resilient leaders, one connection at a time, and it's been my pleasure to share this information with you. Thank you, and everyone have a great day.